the Pout Pout Fish, and the Can't Sleep Blues. Sometimes Papa can't sleep either. Late one quiet evening, in the inky ocean deep, Mr. Fish blubbed, "Oh, I can't get to sleep." His mind was fizzy busy, and his fins were full of whim. Though he wanted to be dozing, there were 0 Z's for him. I can't sleep into dreamland. I can't slide into snooze. I'm wide awake. It's hard to take this can't sleep blues. A sleepy voice spoke softly. "Need some tips?" inquired Mrs. Clam. "Just watch and see, and soon you'll be as drowsy as I am." Smooth your seaweed bedding, then imagine fluffy sheep. Count them 1 to 20, and then presto, fall asleep. Mr. Fish took the advice, but he couldn't catch a snooze. "Mrs. Clam, I need more help," Mrs. Clam replied. Zzz. Mrs. Clam fell asleep. Then a sleepy voice spoke softly. "Here's an even better fix. You will love," said Mr. Crab, "all my get-to-sleep quick tricks." Just put on purple PJs and 5 or 6 orange socks. Then soothe your busy thinking on a pillow made of rocks. Mr. Fish took the advice, but he couldn't catch a snooze. "Mr. Crab, what now?" Mr. Crab replied. Mr. Crab fell asleep too. Then a sleepy voice spoke softly. "Here's what I would suggest. Guaranteed," said Mrs. Eel, to yield a pleasant night's sleep. First, ripple to the left, then ripple to the right. Next, swirl in a circle. Swoosh, swoosh, nighty-night. Mr. Fish took her advice, but he couldn't catch a snooze. "Mr. Eel, what's the deal?" Mrs. Eel replied. What do you think she replied? She zizzed off to sleep. Then a sleepy voice spoke softly. "For your slumber in the sea, here's a plan," said Mrs. Squid. "This always does the trick for me." Just widen out your eyes and give 4 quick tiny blinks. Then slowly close your lids. Automatic 40 winks. Mr. Fish took the advice, but he couldn't catch a snooze. "Mrs. Squid, more ideas?" Mrs. Squid replied. Zzz. Mrs. Squid fell asleep too. Then Mr. Fish heard nothing, just a symphony of snore. He still couldn't sleep. He felt worse than before. I took all of these suggestions, which I followed to a T. Their methods worked for them, but they did not work for me. I don't know what to do. He sank down in the kelp. What good is good advice if it doesn't always help? Then a sparkly voice emerged. "Mr. Fish, you're pretty right." The voice was dear Mrs. Shimmer's. Her smile was kind and bright. "But take what you've been given and learn what you've tried. Then build your own solution. Trust yourself as a guide." "The best advice of all," said Mrs. Shimmer to her friend, "is to learn what works for you and make your own special blend." With that, she said goodnight and departed from the scene. Now Mr. Fish was ready to create his own routine. "I'll settle in my spot. I'll smooth my seaweed bed. I'll smooch my snoozy snuggly, then I'll clear my busy head. I'll swoosh in gentle motion in the ocean wide and deep. I'll close my eyes, fins tucked in, and drift right off to sleep." Mr. Fish had tried his best to resolve his can't sleep blues. "Mr. Fish, how'd it go?" Mr. Fish replied, "Zzz." He fell right asleep too. He had to learn for himself what would work, and he figured it out.